about a 36-point overperformance by the Democratic candidate Keshan Scott in this state house district, the 50th state house district. Yep, Keshan Scott defeated the Republican candidate William Odin by 41 points in a district that former Vice President Kamala Harris won by only about 5 in 2024. With 100% of the results reporting, Keshan Scott, 24 years old, wins in a 41-point blowout and heads to the South Carolina House of Representatives over William Odin.
South Carolina Republicans said their red wave was unstoppable. Then Keshan Scott happened. A blue victory in a sea of red. And not just any win, a 41-point obliteration of the GOP candidate. What went wrong for Republicans? And what did Democrats learn that could reshape 2026? You'll want to stay for this one. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. South Carolina, a state synonymous with Republican dominance for decades, has just witnessed a political earthquake. It's like finding out your self-proclaimed unbeatable team just lost 41-0. Now at home. For years, the GOP fortress in South Carolina has been a symbol of impenetrable conservative power. They've held a Republican supermajority since 2022, winning comfortably even in close presidential showdowns. But suddenly, one district hollered plot twist and flipped blue like someone accidentally washed the GOP's red jersey with a load of denim jeans.
Folks, we are getting some breaking news out of South Carolina, where a special election that was just held in South Carolina's 50th State House District has just concluded with the Democratic candidate defeating the Republican candidate.
This isn't just any flip. It's a 41-point blowout win for Democratic underdog Keshan Scott in a district where Kamala Harris barely braved out a win just a couple of years back. Yes, the same district that was waving its bright red Republican banners in 2024 suddenly pulled a full 180 pivot. Why? Because everyone loves an underdog. Maybe, but more importantly, Scott and the Democrats nailed what the GOP completely overlooked. Voters actually care about issues that affect their daily lives. Healthcare, jobs, roads that don't feel like a sneak preview for a 4D earthquake simulator, those things matter. The turnout numbers alone tell a story. In this once Republican stronghold, Democratic participation surged by 48% compared to previous elections. All the while, Republican participation tripped and fell behind by 10%.
He's a pro-choice young rural candidate, and that's what wins. This is how we outrun and how bold politics can defeat fascism in a big deal. Folks are talking about the 41-point overperformance, but very few folks are putting a face to the name. Take a look, everybody, as Paolo Cremita says, of Representative-elect Keshan Scott, leader of the DNC, Ken Martin, who's been commenting on a lot of these big Democratic overperformances in the recent special elections across the country. Ken Martin writes, "Congratulations to Keshan Scott."
Possibly because Scott's campaign looked like it belonged in 2026, and his opponent's approach was ripped straight out of a 90s political nostalgia scrapbook. This wasn't just some isolated fluke or random excuse. This was strategy, smart strategy. Voters didn't just show up, they showed up energized. Scott's approach clearly struck a chord, resonating with people who likely had the straight ticket voting option at their fingertips, but decided, nah, I'm going custom this year. But here's the really interesting part. The district wasn't just flipping because Scott could smile and communicate like a human being. It flipped because he focused on real priorities. This wasn't a base election filled with partisan bickering. Scott campaigned on healthcare, education, infrastructure, the stuff that impacts people's everyday lives. It turns out voters in District 50 woke up and said, you know what? I'd rather have affordable insulin than hear another debate about rainbow-colored textbooks. The GOP, stuck in its own echo chamber completely underestimated this shift in priorities. Their cultural talking points fell flat, while Scott kept driving home practical solutions. And let's not forget, this district was considered safely Republican. We're talking mail it in and send a thank you note to the voters. Kind of safe. Until it wasn't. The GOP underestimated a lot Scott's campaign, the priorities of the electorate, and even the simple fact that people in 2026 aren't as easily pigeonholed by outdated voter assumptions. This election proved that gerrymandered maps and complacency can't save a party that refuses to meet voters where they are. Now, the humor of this situation isn't lost on anyone. Can we laugh a little at the fact that a 24-year-old minister is outmaneuvering seasoned career politicians? Because that's glorious. This district was more than just a political anomaly. It was a preview. If even a single district in the Deep South is willing to throw out party loyalty for practical solutions, what's stopping other districts from following suit? Democrats didn't just collect a win, they learned valuable lessons on staying connected to voter concerns. Republicans, meanwhile, are left scratching their heads, probably arguing over whose fault it was. Spoiler, it's all of theirs. But it's not just about one district flipping. There's trouble brewing deep within the GOP itself. What happens when a party spends more time fighting itself than it does fighting its opponents? Well, welcome to the South Carolina GOP, where the most heated battles are taking place inside their own house. The Democrats didn't have to lift a finger to exploit these cracks. The Republicans are doing it for them. Let's start with the chaos unfolding in Horry County, one of the GOP's most critical strongholds in South Carolina. You've got two factions at war with each other, the traditional conservatives clinging to the party of Reagan, and the MAGA loyalists who believe Reagan might have been a little too soft for their taste. The result, absolute dysfunction. Official meetings devolve into shouting matches, leadership elections end with accusations of cheating, and it's less of a political party and more of a family reunion gone wrong. In fact, the battle for Horry County GOP chair last year between Roger Slagle and Reese Boyd became so absurd that people couldn't even agree on something as simple as who got the leftover donuts. Across the country, this infighting is showing up in real ways. Look at Arizona or Michigan, where local GOP chapters are tearing themselves apart over primary challenges, fundraising scandals, and whether or not it's appropriate to use the word liberal as an insult in public parks. Spoiler alert, it's not. The South Carolina special election showed exactly how this division plays out when it's time to vote. A fractured GOP simply cannot mobilize its base effectively. Voter turnout among Republicans in District 50 hit a disastrous low, partly because voters couldn't figure out which team they were on anymore. Meanwhile, the Democrats looked like the picture of unity. Keshan Scott's campaign didn't just capitalize on Republican infighting, it actively avoided any semblance of drama. There weren't competing factions, no backroom conflicts, no Twitter arguments over whether the campaign was too left or not left enough. Democrats in South Carolina saw an opportunity and did the one thing Republicans didn't. They worked together. And the kicker, while Republicans were locked in dueling power struggles and relitigating issues that should have been settled years ago, Democrats were building an actual movement. They weren't just critiquing their opponents, they were putting in the work. For every Republican leadership meeting that dissolved into chaos, there was probably a Democratic volunteer depositing another door hanger about Keshan Scott's healthcare plan. One side got busy solving problems, the other side got busy fighting over party chairs and Facebook memes. Infighting isn't just bad optics, it's bad strategy, and in District 50 it couldn't have played out more clearly. While the GOP was busy arguing about who represents their real values, Democrats were out connecting with voters who care more about the cost of insulin than internal party drama. But it's not just internal chaos dragging the GOP down, it's also their messaging strategy that's failing to connect with voters. Bathrooms, books, and bans. When did running the country turn into a high school drama about who gets to use which locker? While voters are busy trying to figure out how to afford groceries or pay off their medical bills, the GOP is laser focused on culture war battles that barely make it past the Fox News bubble. It's like trying to fix a leaky roof by pointing at it and arguing whether the roof should identify as shingles or tiles. But here's the thing, people are tired of these distractions. They're not voting based on whether certain books are banned. They're voting because their car just hit a pothole so deep it felt like an archaeological dig. Let's lay it out. South Carolina Republicans threw the usual culture war grenades with their typical playbook. fear of change and outrage over social issues. We've seen it before. Think bathroom policies, book bans, and vague warnings about woke indoctrination, all perfectly calibrated for a cable news audience. But on the ground, none of these topics seem to stick with voters in District 50. Meanwhile, Keshan Scott talked about things like healthcare access, expanding infrastructure, and making schools better, not just for sound bites, but in ways that resonated with how people actually lived. He talked about improving infrastructure and making education affordable, which might sound basic, but compared to the GOP's obsession with cultural wedge politics, it was revolutionary. Turns out voters care more about affording medical bills than whether or not the local library has a book with 2 moms in it. Who knew? It's almost comedic how Republicans thought recycling the same tired playbook would work. They were banking on outrage, urging their base to show up and vote out of fear. But outrage is a fleeting emotion. Voters can't stay angry about book bans or TikTok forever when their other problems like healthcare costs and wages are screaming for attention. On the flip side, Scott made a case for trusting his leadership to make practical changes. He made it clear he wasn't there to argue about imaginary villains conjured up for TV ratings. He was there to get stuff done, and the voters overwhelmingly agreed. National polling reflects this shift in priorities too. A recent Atlas Intel poll showed Democrats holding a 52% to 41% advantage over Republicans across the country. Part of that lead is because the GOP's messaging is hopelessly disconnected from voters' actual concerns. Let's face it, you can only hear about drag queen story hour so many times before it starts sounding like a poorly planned distraction from real policy discussions. The Democrats, meanwhile, have positioned themselves as the party that actually cares about solving people's challenges. This isn't rocket science, it's just listening to what matters to people. The GOP's obsession with culture wars isn't just out of touch, it's actively turning voters away. Here's what's fascinating. It's not that voters don't care about moral or cultural issues. They do. But what they respond to, first and foremost, are the things that impact them directly. You can't pay a hospital bill with a book ban, and cheap slogans about patriotism don't fill potholes or fix bridges. Keshan Scott understood that. His campaign showed that you can win even in a deep red district if you speak to practical concerns. Republicans, meanwhile, seem to think every voter is tuning into political debates like it's a season finale of Real Housewives. Even when other races have shown the same trend, Republicans refuse to adjust their strategy. You'd think after losing key elections in places like Nebraska, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, they'd stop and reconsider. This disconnect is glaring, and if anything, it sets up a dangerous trend for Republicans heading into 2026. Here's the deal: the GOP's culture wars may fire up a small, loud slice of their base, but they're alienating everyone else. Suburban and swing voters, those critical make-or-break blocks, aren't nodding along to long rants about banning certain books in schools. They're thinking about how their taxes are spent, whether their kids have access to good education, and whether their neighborhoods feel safe. Ignoring these voters isn't just bad politics, it's electoral suicide. District 50's flip wasn't just a wake-up call, it's a neon billboard screaming that voters want something different. Keshan Scott proved you can win convincingly by cutting through the nonsense and focusing on the things that unite people: better healthcare, reliable schools, and safer roads. Band-aid solutions don't cut it anymore, and outrage-based campaigning is clearly losing its grip. Voters are smarter than the GOP seems to think, and they're demonstrating that by showing up for candidates like Scott. This win in South Carolina isn't just a blue blip in a red sea. It's a sign voters are done with the noise. They're choosing leaders who focus on fixing what's broken, not fighting over culture war scraps that make headlines but solve nothing. It's proof that even in the Deep South, people are waking up to the power of practical leadership. So get involved, stay informed, vote, support candidates who prioritize solutions over sound bites. Because if a 24-year-old minister can flip a district like this, imagine what 2026 holds. That unstoppable red wave. It might have just hit its match.